going? Silent Command stream. Today is our first episode of the Expressive Conducting series. All right. So joining me today are staff members Lydia Marshall and Claire Wilcox. All right. So I think all of us right now can agree, before we even dive deep into expressive conducting or anything like that, I want people to know before we start today that it's kind of super important to get the basics down before we even start talking about or thinking about expressive conducting. So yeah, I know we have a lot of videos in the stream currently on like fundamentals, basics, even probably some on expressive conducting, I think. But I want to use right now to be like a way we dive deeper into expressive conducting more than what we do already have on the stream. But I think like right now I take a lot of notes, so here's my notes. I wanted to make sure we talked about that you have to have a really good knowledge of like time, fundamentals, all that stuff, and make sure that all that is clear before you even dive into all this expressive motions or like more advanced side of conducting. So yeah, do you guys have anything on that, I guess, before I start?
Yeah. I think,
Go
sorry.
ahead. Well, yeah.
Especially with fundamentals, it's just like if you're learning to play your instrument. I play the flute, so if I was in 6th grade and took a famous such as James Galway and just wanted to play exactly like him from my first day, that I wouldn't do it correctly. It wouldn't be efficient. It wouldn't look good. It wouldn't sound good. It would just not be pretty. So that the same principle is applied to conducting or learning any kind of new skill. You don't want to just jump into all the like really cool stuff that made you want to start that instrument or start learning to conduct. You have to learn the fundamentals first, make that your base, and then you can jump into stuff that's a little more advanced, and it's really going to serve a higher purpose.
Yeah, just adding to that, for me, my #1 rule for conducting is always clarity, and that is clarity of tempo, clarity of intent, and expression. All of those things play into clarity, and you can never sacrifice that, even if it's for a really cool cue. If you sacrifice the clarity of your tempo, it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, like if we're talking about the basics of conducting, I kind of want to start today's video with the basics of expressive movement. And kind of like, in my opinion, more recently now, actually, I really like more expressive movement than just cues, if that makes sense. Because a lot of people think that, and I guess a lot of young conductors, they think that just cueing is expressive conducting or left-hand independence is expressive conducting. But more recently, now that, you know, I am in this music degree that I'm doing in my 3rd year, or I guess just finished 3rd year, studying more wind conducting has made me realize and watch a lot of, you know, wind conductors. So, and that's a whole nother thing. I know, Lydia, we were going to talk about that a little bit later. Like, it's like a whole nother side. And in my opinion, it's like 2 sides. So you have like the drum major, then you have the indoor ensemble conductor, where I guess you can also be a little more intimate and expressive in a different way. So like how we transfer that information to the field has been something like really fascinating for me to try to figure out, because I've tried to show this to a lot of my students recently, and it really, in my opinion, made me a better teacher and them a better conductor, because I can take what I've done in this wind conducting track and bring it down to my drum major studies, and it kind of just opens up a whole new world of creativity for me. So I really like that. So to start off, I'm just going to do a lot of like standing and sitting. So yeah, so I'm going to start off with the basics of how I want you to think about expressive movement. And that's to first know the space around you, right? So I'm going to teach you a few exercises to actually explore those. And these come from Malco exercises. You've probably heard of those. I use them a lot in my teaching. Have you guys heard of them? Any of you guys with teaching? Yeah, do you guys use them a lot?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. So to make sure I'm doing this right there, they're going to correct me. All right. So to show like and explore your horizontal plane, this is a really great basic one, right? And it actually really it does exactly that. It explores your horizontal plane. Now, a quick tip here, all right? You want to make sure on the change of direction, even when we go upwards, so we're going to do vertical soon, you want to make sure that the motion when you change is as smooth as it can be. All right, that's the key right here. But for me, I really like using it first to understand that I have all of this space right here horizontally. And it really just goes as far as you can move. So this is like the basics I'll do here. We'll do it again here vertically, just exploring your vertical plane, right? And then we also have the sagittal plane, forward to back, all right? So with that, you can actually do like here's a little quick tip. With that, I do like left hand independence exercises with some Malco exercises. You can change, so maybe your right hand can stay on the horizontal and the left hand go vertical. Do you guys do any of this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes like in my lessons recently, I've like put it on a metronome and told my students to go like 4 each, 2, 3, 4, and then change. Just like a really quick left hand independence exercise as well as exploring the space around you. All right. So with that, I'm gonna come back to my notes. I want to make sure once you kind of figure that out and you know that you have all of this space, I want you to view it as this is your canvas, right? So as a conductor, you have all this creativity in your head and all of this expressive ideas that you may want to show your band and all that, and just to conduct the music the way it should, right? So you want to view, and this is how I've done it, right? I want you to view all of the space that once you explored that as a canvas, all right? And all of that is all here in front of you, okay? So what I like to do kind of really when I listen to music is to make sure I'm kind of thinking about how big should I be here? How loud is the music? Or how small should my patterns be? And that's just super basic, so I want to like touch that now, I guess, before we move on. But yeah, I've gotten even to more deeper with that and gone, when you're listening to music, you can actually listen to music and think, is this horizontal music or is this vertical music? You know, like if something's a really huge moment, then that's vertical music. And you can actually show that. And I know basic patterns, you know, if you're doing basic patterns, all of that, you are kind of using this vertical plane and horizontal plane like at the same time. But I don't want you to think of it like that. I only think about, is this vertical music or horizontal music when I'm thinking about expression. So when I'm thinking outside of the box, I still probably will be doing a 4/4 pattern or, you know, a basic pattern. And especially us as drum majors, as opposed to the indoor ensemble conductor. Because the indoor ensemble conductor, you don't have to conduct every beat. And actually in my lessons, I also do that with people. I don't know if you guys do that with your lessons. Like we'll talk about melding patterns, which is so cool. We'll do that with, I have like the same exercise I do with all my students. So like if they met up, they'd probably know exactly what we're all talking about. But yeah, we do this thing where it's a melding of patterns exercise. And at first, it's super hard for the drum majors to get because we're always so used to conducting every single beat. And we're kind of on the show, we can all agree we have to in the show. But those of us who have conducted like indoor ensembles, you don't have to all the time. And really they actually tell you not to, right? So I've had to do both. So again, bringing that back to some drum major stuff when you can, it's actually been really fascinating. So we do that. That's a little side note. But yeah, those are just like, I guess, my initial thoughts on expression. But I want to make sure you guys are, as you watch this video and the video series, kind of taking it, what we're saying, as like, you know, in order. So right now, I want you to first think about being aware of the space around you. That's the first thing you should do, right? How much space should you be really big here, really small here? And it could get even more in depth later when you start talking more about different musical style. Yeah, so that's kind of like my tips to get started.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. When I start working on expressive conducting with my students, I find that pretty much every single student, myself included, when I was first learning how to be expressive, limits themselves to like this very small box right in front of their body, when really this canvas that you reference is a much bigger space in front of you than you realize. So really doing those Malco exercises, I call those conductor long tones. They're like vegetables. They're really
nice.
They're really important. If you're a wind player, you know what I'm talking about. But
yeah,
they're like super important both for exploring your space and also just learning how to like use your joints in correlation with each other. So
yeah, see, I'm glad you said that. I totally even missed that. Like talking about the hinges. You can talk about that with me if you'd like. Do you know a lot about hinges?
Yeah, so I think, again, this is another habit that every single drum major has when they first start out, and this is something I still like struggle to work on, is using my joints like opposite of how I should. So if I were to put, I always use like percentages, but I feel like your wrist and hand should be 50% of the motion, or 60 even. Your elbow should be like 30, and then your shoulder should be like 10%, which usually that's flipped. We use a lot of shoulder, especially in drum major conducting, which can just like limit you in so many ways. It's hard to sustain. You'll feel pain by the end of after 30 minutes of conducting like that. And it also just creates a lot of excess movement that I think is not necessary and can be distracting. But once I learned how to really prioritize my wrist and elbow and just let my shoulder kind of move as a reaction from those joints, I was able to sustain that type of conducting for a much longer time period, which allowed me to just be free to be more expressive in that way. So try to use less shoulder. I like to have my students do exercises. I'm going to demonstrate here too. Do exercises of isolating different joints to feel what it feels like. So just like use one hand and hold your forearm still and just feel what it feels like to only use your wrist. And then do the same thing, just using your, holding your bicep and just using your elbow. Because a lot of times when I have them do that, they'll find that they're still using their shoulder and realize that they don't actually know what it feels like just to use their elbow. So I think understanding how those joints work, especially together by using those Balco exercises, that's a really, really important step just in conducting in general, let alone expressive.
Yeah, like that's something I actually had to learn going into the wind band conducting, actually. It was, of course, going from drum corps and drum major conducting into that. So all my professors, they were like, you're using way too much of your elbow right now. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's all I'm used to. And for those of you who don't know, the more wind band conductor, everything leads from the wrist. So like you have to think like if I'm moving, there's a string on my wrist, basically. So like it has to be the wrist. And when I first started, it was all elbow from all this drum major stuff. So there's a difference there too. So I love that you said the 10% shoulder, because I 100% agree. There's so many high school conductors that start off like this. And I've noticed a lot of band directors actually have more recently gone away from this old-fashioned style where you have to really use all of your arm very robotically, because that's really just so much pain here, which is what I've always liked about the style that we teach here at Silent Command. It's kind of really relaxed and you don't hurt yourself, which is perfect. Because our body is our instrument if you're a conductor. So, I mean, you don't want it to be in pain at all. So I love that. I love that up at the hinges. And to add that before I stop talking, that people don't realize the fingers are also a hinge. And you could totally use that now that we're also talking more expression. You could so use that to your advantage for a lot of things. And if you want something to be like super soft, for example, you can maybe just use your fingers. And that's really, really, really effective. People don't realize that. They're still like this and they think they're piano. And they could, ensemble, train the people watching them to know this is my like pianissimo. And you're going to have to watch that. You're going to have to know that's what I mean, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. With expressive conducting, it's really good to parallel wind conducting and drum major conducting, because really what we're talking about is the happy medium. So with specific drum major conducting, what you think of is just like 1, 3, 1, 3, and that's what we all do, and that's great. It works sometimes, but to create a little bit more of like a story, and you're actually telling them what you want to do. Like if they were to be doing an air rep, like just no music, they're just blowing air through your instrument, what would you want them to be thinking about? That's what you need to conduct what you want them to do. And so one thing I was told when I was learning how to use my left hand a little bit more was that your left hand is like the adjective hand. Your right hand is really what's keeping tempo most of the time. And this is what we're talking about with the blend of like the wind band conducting and marching band conducting. Your right hand is pretty much always going to be keeping tempo, no matter what. And your left hand is going to be what's showing expression. Sometimes you will use both, or you're going to show a different style and maybe use a little bit more fingertips with your right hand. But your left hand is really the adjective hand. This is what you want them to do. This is how you want them to do it. And that's kind of how I started thinking about it. And I would put my right hand behind my back and just conduct with my left hand and make it a point not to do every single beat, because you don't have to with your left hand. So like what I would mean by that is when you're conducting and maybe you're at just like a pretty peaceful part of the music, then you can just drop your left hand and really just come in when you need it to be there. And you're still giving them exactly what they need over here. This is just how I want you to do it. And, you know, giving them a little more information with that hand. So the more you can start thinking about separating those two and using this as the what I want you to do and this is how I want you to do it. That's a really basic way to start thinking about what we're talking about. And that's just with the hands. What we're talking about with expressive, even more expressive conducting is you're going to use your whole body. And that's really what's going to bring it more, just going to bring more energy to what you're doing. Because when you're on a field, everyone's further away from you than you would be in a wind band setting. So you do have to use a little bit more expression with your body for them to see that. Even just something as little as breathing with them. It's going to bring some sort of expression to your face that they're going to see. Like if you go watch my head cam from this past year, I'm breathing with them all over the place. It's actually kind of comical, but it helps me feel more in touch with them. And then it just helps everyone relax a little bit more. I've had people come tell me, like, I like that you breathe with us. I think that's great. So everything that you do is going to have some sort of expression. And it starts with the hands, but it's going to be more impactful if you use your face, your whole body. I know some people like jump on the podium and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to get super, I know I jump too sometimes. You don't have to get super crazy with it, but it's still little things. You'd be amazed. Like they were just talking about, like you'd be amazed how tiny you can be, and they're still going to see it and they're still going to understand. Sometimes being smaller is going to be better than just being gigantic, using your shoulders and more, using more arm. It's going to, one, be tiring, just like they said. You're not going to sustain it as long. And you have actually less options if you use more shoulder, because you're actually creating way more things for them to watch. Like, for example, if I'm using more shoulder, it's going to look like this, and that's pretty chaotic to watch. I'm pretty clear. Like you can see my this, but I have way too much here going on. So if you show this, I'm barely moving my shoulder. I'm moving it naturally. But that's like the basic you would want to go. And then you have more room to do something like this. If this is your go-to and you try to do something like that, it's going to look super chaotic and you don't want to start with that. So this is the base of what you want to do. And then occasionally you can get like that super big and use that as emphasis. But this gives you more room to like do something here and do something just more expressive. So basically what I'm trying to say is give yourself the opportunity to use every hinge, every part of your body, every motion that you can by controlling your motion a little bit more. And if you want to learn how to start moving your body, this might help segue into like some more movement. Just take the piece of movement music that you're trying to work with and close your eyes. Maybe like be in a dark room if you want, but close your eyes and just listen to it. And you just move your body to the music. It doesn't have to be in a conducting way, in just like a silly interpretive dance type way. Get to know the music, get to know what your body can do. I do this all the time. I know Claire talked about that she does it too. It really helps. It really helps you understand what your body can do and like what you are interpreting the music as. And you can translate that into conducting. You're gonna feel silly. It's gonna actually be kind of fun, but you're gonna feel silly. And it's really gonna help you explore all of those different movements that you can do, and then you can apply that to conducting.
Yeah, it's so important. In fact, even I don't let myself conduct any time until I've at least feel really comfortable, like I understand the music with my body, like Lydia mentioned. And I'm glad you brought this up, being expressive with your whole body, because I feel like everyone, including myself, when we talk about expressive conducting, we immediately think about, like left hand independence movement or cueing or whatever it may be. but there are so many other layers that I feel like are so important to elevate whatever message you're conveying with your left hand. Like you mentioned, just breathing with your ensemble, or even more basic is like your pattern size. Like you're talking about, I've never seen a conductor, I'm sure this exists, but I've never seen a conductor conduct too small. It's always too big. And I always think that we can like keep our default pattern smaller, which gives us more room, like you were talking about, to be expressive. And just your body orientation, how you're using that, and what type of pattern you choose to use can be a huge expressive decision. If you're doing a focal point pattern, or more of a classical hybrid pattern, or, you know, even a stop to beat pattern could be an expressive decision that you make. But there are so many other aspects that I think are really, really important to develop. Because a lot of the time, I think we can all agree that no one's really actually staring at what your hands are doing as a conductor. A lot of times they're looking at your face or just your entire upper body, and whatever your left hand does is kind of in the periphery. But if you do this really beautiful cue and your face looks like this, I can barely even keep myself from making something happen with my face. It doesn't matter what you did with your left hand, because I'm just focused on the fact that you look dead inside. So I would say a lot of the times, whatever beautiful cue you've worked on doesn't even matter if you don't have those other aspects in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. I've had more comments on people reacting to a smile I've given in rehearsal than a really cool cue. I've had color guard members come up to me and say, like, it was that smile that got me through that rep. Like, I looked up and you were smiling, that got me through it. That's when you're communicating with them. It's not going to be that amazing gesture you've been working on for so long. Sometimes it's as tiny as a smile. And, you know, that's kind of what Claire's talking about. If you look dead inside, your message is going to fall flat. No matter what you do, how coordinated you are in doing it, if your face and the rest of your body isn't communicating the correct message, it's going to fall flat and mean nothing. So you really have to use everything you've got to communicate this.
Yeah, both of you hit actually really good topics that I hope I remember. Going back, Lydia, when you talked the first time, you said energy. And I don't think many people realize that has to be one of the main, not the main, but one of the main reasons why expressive conducting is important. And that's why everybody, every drum major, you know, lessons teacher, whatever that you learn from, they always talk about the importance of expressive conducting, but you don't really know why. But if you break it down, that has to be up there for me, because like you said, Claire, they're not watching everything you do here. They probably won't be. Maybe they will, but most likely they won't. But they will see your face and everything you do here. So I think the face and all the facial expressions, all of that plays into the energy, which actually makes it more expressive and I guess more important, if that makes sense. I'm forgetting something, but yeah, I hope it'll come to me throughout the time that we're talking. But yeah, I wanted to hit that before we left that real quick.
Yeah, and that's another thing. We talked about like the interpretive dancing exercise. This is another thing I make my students do when we're talking about expression, and specifically facial expressions, is instead of, you know, not conducting and moving your body, listening to a piece, not conducting, and just doing facial expressions. You know, I think there's a video somewhere of Leonard Bernstein just conducting with his face.
There is.
Which is
it's amazing.
because he's Leonard Bernstein. But if you approach every piece like that, then when you get to conduct an ensemble, it will feel more natural, because a lot of times that's what we struggle with, is just feeling really awkward making facial expressions, especially to a recording. But I feel like now that I've worked on facial expressions, I'm so much more expressive just when I talk. Like, seeing myself on video is strange, but you have to be over the top for it to communicate, like we've been talking about, across 50 yards or whatever the distance may be. So that includes your facial expressions. So you have to, you know, go as hard as you can and then multiply that times 10. And then that's like the bare minimum when it comes to facial expressions.
Exactly. It's going to feel awkward because it's so not intuitive. You're so focused on doing the new skill of conducting that you learned that it's really hard sometimes to implement that facial expression. And, you know, something someone told me once is that conducting is one of the most like vulnerable things that you can do in front of people. And you're really trying to bring forward what you're feeling and what you want them to feel, and in turn what you want the audience to feel with what you're doing. Because what you're trying to do is, you know, tell the musicians what they need to do with your body, but you can't talk. And so you have to use every tool that you have. And one of the tools we haven't talked about yet would be eye contact, because without eye contact, your facial expression, your hands, your body, no matter what it is, it's also going to fall flat. It sounds like we're telling you to do so many things at once, but I promise once you isolate all of these things and start thinking about them one at a time, you're going to be able to start doing it in like a second nature way. So with eye contact, like if you're conducting something like a slow ballad and like maybe you have a soloist come in or you have a really impactful moment come in, no matter how big or small the moment is, if you're not looking at the person or the group of people that you want to do something specific, it's going to also fall flat, and you're not going to feel as connected to the musicians. And in turn, they're not going to feel as connected to you. So you have to make a point to look at whoever you're conducting. Like, kind of what I mean by that is, if I have a trumpet soloist over here and my focus has been over here for a while and I want them to come in, it would look really silly if I just did that, right? I'm not looking at them. They have nothing to take from, like, they don't know how to come in. They don't know when to come in. They don't know how to sound. So try to think of it as like, your conducting is like, maybe you're conducting like a robot, that they're going to react to exactly what you tell them to do. And if you tell them to do this, they're going to play. It's going to be like watching paint dry. So if your focus is over here and you got a soloist over here, you have to like be expressive and bring them in. You have to look at them and you have to say, this is when I want you to come in, without actually talking. You have to maybe give them a left-hand cue, look them dead in the eye, breathe with them. No matter what it is, you have to make that personal connection with them. And if it's a full ensemble, maybe I like to still look at someone, like make a personal connection with someone in the corps, in the band, no matter who I'm conducting, because that's when that musician is going to hear what you're trying to say with your body. So eye contact, facial expression, body movement, hands, it all ties together, and it sounds like so much, but like I said, if you practice this one at a time, like Claire was saying, just look in the mirror and conduct the piece with your face. Or if you want to learn how to move your body, just turn the lights off, shut your eyes, and start moving. If you want to work on eye contact, maybe you can get a friend and just make them feel uncomfortable with your cues or whatever it is. Just something, anything is going to help you at this point. And then once you take all of those things and you've isolated them, just like with playing your instrument, when you isolate articulation or slurs or whatever, it's going to come together at some point and become second nature. And conducting for you is going to be more fun. The corps or the band is going to react to you more, and the audience is going to feel it a lot more. So it all will fall together. You just have to work on everything separately.
Yeah, and it does, like you said, feel like, because we've already hit so many great topics right now, and I promise you, like, when it comes to conducting, I'm like a super huge nerd. So like all this is so perfect. But actually, with all of that we have been talking about, it really easily correlates with each other. So going back to what we talked about in like just normal conducting, basic conducting, when you learn basic patterns, that's kind of like, that's just the tempo, you're learning time, you're learning the basic patterns, you're learning meter, time signatures, whatever. But when you're talking about more expressive conducting, that's when we're talking about this nonverbal communication with the ensemble. So, and then I know this will correlate a little bit with what we already talked about in the score study series, if you haven't watched that already. But it's kind of like that when you read the score, that it has all the answers and it shows you who to communicate with and when, you know, at what certain time of the piece. And then the expressive conducting is how. Yeah, that's all how you do it. But if you're just all the entire time keeping time, and I talked about this in the last video, if you do that all the time at like just 4/4 all the time, that you're conducting all 4/4, any song in 4/4 ever in the world at that tempo. You're not conducting that certain music at all. And so with the expressive conducting, that's you want to make sure you're doing. You actually, of course, with proper score study, you actually know how and when and with who, whatever, you know, to communicate that with. And like you said, it is nonverbal, so it is kind of difficult. So everything we have talked about, the face, like the body language, like I said, I'm super huge on the more body movement, expressive movement than actual just cues. You know, giving cues and stuff, cool, right? And it needs to be there in a drum major and conductor, but actually being, and I want to say, I think Bernstein said this too, going back to him. I think he says you're dancer first and conductor second. Yeah. So
Yep.
that's actually really, really cool when you think about that. So actually being this expressive mover, and this is gonna segue me into my next topic, and that's actually, it's just moving. So Claire actually talked about this earlier. It's where you just play music and move to it, and we're not talking about beat patterns. We're not talking about conducting beat patterns to the music and to the tempo. I'm talking about actually really just explore so many different gestures. And we talked about space earlier. Determine what space and how loud the music is, so then you can think about first, okay, how wide should I be horizontally? How wide should I be vertically? Is this vertical music? Is this horizontal music? And once you have that, and of course it changes throughout the piece, but once you kind of get a basis of that, you don't start thinking patterns, just think gestures. And there's like unlimited, we all can agree, I think, there's unlimited opportunities for gesture because it's all so personal. You know, I can't sit here, and we could, but it wouldn't be that helpful for anybody if we just sat here and taught this gesture and this is how you do a powerful, you know, forte entrance. That's not, maybe that's one way, yes, but it's not going to be the way for every piece of music. So that's where I really enjoy what we call free form conducting. And so it's really what we just talked about. You put on music, and you can barely know the piece of music. You could know it like the back of your hand. It really doesn't matter. But just put it on. Don't worry about tempo or anything, and just conduct with it. Like I know there was a part, I was looking at the Petite Symphony, and instead of actually conducting, like once it hits like this B section, it's really light and bouncy, kind of. And then instead of just doing this the entire time, you could. But if you think about it, once you set this tempo, the ensemble, of course, this being a wind ensemble, they're going to be fine with the tempo. So then instead of worrying about being this tempo police guy, where you can actually be guiding with music and musicality, expression, phrasing of lines, like all this stuff. I know this may be like blowing your minds, but really, you can think about this stuff. And I love it. I'm telling you, I'm super passionate about this. But instead of just beating time, like take that away. Well, they're fine. And instead, you can actually think more music. There's a really like light passage, and I'm just doing this gesture to show that this is how I want it. Like da 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 da, something like that, you know, instead of like da 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 da, this beat pattern the entire time. Okay, so do that. Play around with as many gestures as you want. It's like endless, and it's so fun. I mean, I give so many great concerts with the New York Philharmonic in my room every night. I wouldn't show anybody that, you know, but it's me exploring my gestures and stuff like that, like, or the Berlin Phil. You know, I give so many good concerts here in my room, but that's it. You know, but it really does so much. So then when you actually do score study or practice something, you have so many like ideas for gestures in music. You could look at a score and go, okay, this is really light and short. Well, I kind of did that with this piece that I was just moving to. And you do that, and you'll be surprised how effective it may be with your ensemble. Maybe it's not, and then that's even more experimenting for you. So it's super fun. I love this stuff, if you can't tell. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about that, the free form conducting.
All right, so another topic I wanted to touch on today is effective conducting, like effective gestures and cues, expressive conducting versus just pretty conducting that may look really cool and feel really cool, but doesn't actually do anything for your ensemble. So whenever you add any type of gesture or cue or motion, any type of expressive conducting, you should always ask yourself, what is this actually doing for my ensemble? What is the intent behind this cue? And is it actually creating that in the best, most effective way possible? So like, for instance, I think a specific one that I'm definitely guilty of doing is a point. Sometimes I think there are definitely places for this in marching band conducting, but I think a lot of the time, this is not nearly as effective as an open hand cue can be. If it's some type of motion, especially when they're that far away, I think a point can feel really cool, but a lot of the times it's not the most effective thing there. And another thing to consider is this is actually different for every single ensemble you'll stand in front of, and even sometimes on different days. Um, some ensembles might respond really well to a point, while others, it doesn't do anything for them. So it really takes you being malleable in your ensemble and being really in tune with your ensemble to understand and try out different things and see what they respond to best. And a lot of times that's not the thing that necessarily feels or looks the most cool. But you really become a mature conductor once you understand that every motion you create or do has a purpose behind it, what that purpose is, and how you create that with your ensemble.
But yeah, talking about purpose and making sure everything is expressive, but also has good intent and communication behind it. A really good way to check to see if you're actually communicating what you want to communicate is to videotape yourself conducting a recording, or even in a rehearsal. I find that that's even a better time to record yourself, because you might not be focusing exactly on like doing a specific cue or doing something. So record yourself and then mute it and watch it and see if you were watching yourself on the field, if you're actually communicating what you want them to see. And I've found I've like corrected myself so many times by doing that, either in the mirror, videotaping a rehearsal. I'll watch myself and realize I'm not communicating what I thought I was, or I'm not as clear as I thought I was here. It'll also help you catch those awkward cues that you're giving, or making something that's like not as clear. And with expressive conducting, you have to, like Claire said, it also has to be effective. So making sure that what you're doing is the most effective thing for them to watch with whatever their feet are doing. So I know, for example, in our ballad last year, we were going 84, but what they really wanted me or needed me to conduct was twice that tempo, because that's what their feet were doing. So you can be as expressive and amazing and beautiful at conducting as you want, but if it's not serving the correct purpose, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. So like Claire said, being able to be malleable and adjust and make sure that what you're doing is effective as well as expressive. If those go together, you're really gonna be the best conductor for your ensemble. And like we said earlier in the video, it's not a memorized routine. If it is, then that's when you know that you're not being an effective conductor. You're just memorizing a routine, doing it, and you're really doing it to look cool. Whether you are consciously choosing that or not, that's what that's communicating. You have to be malleable. You have to do what everyone is going to react the best to. And something Colin used to tell me is you have to be able to pull the score out of their bell. So you have to be conscious of so many things. It can sound really overwhelming, but you have to do them all kind of in harmony together to be the best conductor that you can be. I think I have gotten better at not conducting the same thing or the same piece of music twice, like ever. When I first started, I was totally guilty of that. Even when I started at Crossman as head drum major, I was very guilty of doing the same thing every single time. And a good way to catch yourself doing that is to make every comment that the caption head or the band director, whoever's in charge of you, make every comment that they give your comment. So even if they're talking to the trumpets, if they're saying, trumpets, I need you to play lighter there, you have to tell them that. You have to enforce what they're saying. That's going to be something that helps you catch yourself doing the same thing twice. If they get the same comment twice, you didn't do your job. Even if that's not true, take it personally, because that's going to be what helps you sort of guide your way through becoming a more expressive conductor, but maintaining effectiveness as you go. So those couple things that I mentioned for checking yourself would be videotaping yourself and muting it to see if you're actually doing what you want them to do, and then kind of play that game with yourself of making every comment yours. Otherwise, you're just standing on the podium and being a human metronome. No matter how expressive or whatever cues you're doing, you're not serving the purpose that you need to serve.
Yeah, I like to think of like having a roadmap rather than a routine. So instead of choreographing every single motion you're going to have instead a really strong understanding of like how you would describe each section. So like you said, like this section is light, this section is aggressive and heavy, this section is bouncy, this is playful. And then when you get to those sections, when you have those intentions of communication in mind, then you can use that to find how you want to communicate. Because obviously if I want heavy, I'm not going to conduct like that, of course. And that will help a lot with not just being a choreographed robot conducting the exact same thing over and over again. But yeah, I love your comment about making every comment your own.
Yeah. So we can kind of do like a recap of right now of the first video. The two biggest things that we've kind of really talked about, right, are first off, being aware of the space around you. Okay. That's going to do so many, it's really going to get you starting off thinking they're on the right path, right? And then second, as well as everything we have been talking about, it's kind of really, it narrows down to just move. Like my two biggest pieces of advice I could give you for if you are looking at trying to be a better mover is to one, just move. Freeform conducting, everything we have been talking about. I mean, of course, there's like a technique to all this stuff, but if you're not moving, then you're hurting yourself more than if you are. Okay, so don't worry about, am I doing this correctly right now, right? I mean, of course, that's where you get a teacher, all that stuff, that's helpful. But really, you're gonna grow when you're actually just moving through the space around you. Okay, so move a lot. And the second piece of that is watch as many great conductors as you can. And not just drum majors. Like I know, of course, if you're trying to go for this drum major position, right? Please watch all the great conductors. There's so many, like we could probably give a list right now, right? We won't do that today, but we could probably do that soon. But I will also, watch great orchestral conductors, wind band conductors. You're gonna learn so much from them, get a lot of gesture ideas and everything, okay? So that's kind of like our two biggest topics we talked about today. So next time, in our next video, I think we're gonna actually dive deeper into cues. I know I have a lot of like Laban movement analysis to be introduced to you guys. So yeah, this is super fun, all right? So I hope you guys enjoyed it. All right, so with that, thanks for stopping in. And again, best of luck with your practice.